Okay, Carson, I promise we won't talk about this for too long on this differently scheduled episode than usual, but are you familiar with the expression moving the goalposts? What does that expression mean to you?
Well, in common parlance, it just means, changing the end goal of a project or a requirement or something, and it's usually regarded as a very negative thing.
I was going to say it's kind of a pejorative, right? It's maybe a phrase you wouldn't want to use.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, let me present to you the Canadian Football League, which announced this week that they are moving the goalposts in the field in the coming seasons. And they use that phrase when they're talking about it. And I'm like, no, don't use that phrase.
Listeners, this is the reason we have to record the episode early, is because Will's so mad about this. He was like,
emergency
right now.
CFL pod on
This is an
Upsample.
emergency CFL episode. That is crazy though, right? Like, everyone must hate that. Like, who's happy about this?
I would say if you were going to do this, maybe 2025 is not the year where it's the thing to do.
Yeah.
And nevertheless, they have announced it this year, and they're going to roll this out over a couple of years. But they made a whole bunch of changes that start with moving the uprights that you kick the field goals through from one place on the field to another. And there are other changes to the field that
to just kind
make
of
it more
match,
NFL-like.
Okay, just matching the NFL. Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know there was that. I guess I knew that this field is a different size because it's in metric, but I did not think about like if the goalposts are different.
Well, it's not quite in metric, but the field's bigger. Now the field is still going to be wider. The length of the field is going to become more like the NFL length of the field. It's previously a lot longer. Now the length of the field is going to be quite close to the NFL. It's still going to be a wider field.
Interesting.
But the overall, whereas the entire field used to be way, way bigger, now it's not going to be so. And some of the rules are changing slightly. And the overall discourse around it is that the league and all the various kind of Canadian media people who cover the CFL, which is kind of a tight circle, are all in lockstep talking about how this is necessary and the league needs to change and we need to do something about it. And it seems like many fans like me are very not happy about this for all kinds of reasons, like the timing. The players don't seem to have been consulted on it so far. And it seems, I don't think it will help. Like, I think there's a lot of things you could say about the CFL where it'd be interesting from a marketing perspective, like what you're supposed to do if you're in the Canadian Football League kind of world to make the game as good as possible. I think that's an interesting discussion, but like changing the rules and moving the goalposts, I don't think is the way to go, personally.
That is, well, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. This was before my baseball fandom, but since we're a sports podcast now, baseball did a similar set of changes, although I think they were maybe less controversial at the time, or some of them were less controversial, where baseball's perception was it was way too slow, games took too long, not enough happened. They instituted changes like the pitch clock. They outlawed some like defensive things like aggressive shifting the outfield for left-handed hitters. And I think like it helped baseball's popularity. That became a much more popular sport because it became less painful to watch, is my understanding. I started watching baseball after all these changes. But I have a friend who says, let's have two different leagues and maybe the CFL can benefit from this one. One league where we just like experiment as much as we want, make all these changes, modernize the game. He also posits that league should be allowed to use steroids, that you can just, you should just max out, if you're really getting experimental, let's see how far we can take this. And then one league where it's like the 50s, wood bats, that, take as long as you want, games last all day.
That's interesting. I think the pitch clock and the baseball changes recently is like the best case scenario for this. Like, and I'm sure they have that in mind maybe as like how it could go. So that's the best case scenario. I agree. People view that positively. So we'll see how this goes. It's funny that you mentioned the 50s too, because that's going to come up in my recommendation at the end. So hold on to that.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, but what we actually called this early pod to talk about was that the VSO, the Vancouver Symphony Orchestra musicians, gave a strike notice to the Vancouver Symphony Society that runs the orchestra this week. And because I'm uploading this episode on Thursday, September 25th, Thursday, today, when you are first able to listen to this, is the day when we're going to see them potentially be able to stop work And
Yeah.
that doesn't mean it's necessarily going to happen on this day, but this is the earliest occasion that they could, because they gave this notice on Monday. And so from Thursday afternoon onward, there could be stop work. There could be concerts canceled. VSO started its concert season last week. And I don't think this has happened for the VSO musicians in a long, long time. I actually couldn't figure out any history on it, but I thought I saw somewhere that it was like almost a century ago or over a century ago or something. So I don't think there's any much precedent for this in Vancouver.
That is, yeah, a wild development. I was about to ask if it had happened before, if there's been other kind of labor disputes with them, but my reaction when I first heard about this was surprise. I think in the jazz world, our assumption is that if you make it into a symphony orchestra, that you're kind of just set, that's like the end goal. If you're a classical musician, you spent all those years practicing in really stuffy conservatories. This is the perception. I'm not calling all conservatories stuffy. You spend all those years practicing. You don't get a ton of time to like play in fun bands with your friends, which is like, that's the jazz or pop music trade-off. And then maybe if you're lucky at the very end, you have a unionized musician gig in a symphony orchestra and you're set. You're making like good money for a musician and you're salaried and like you don't have to worry about it anymore. So when I saw the strike notice, I was like, oh wow, maybe that's not the case anymore, or maybe it's more complicated than I thought.
Well, it certainly is one of the few unionized areas. We talked about this on our episode called Is Being an Artist Labor, where we correctly remembered that, oh, this is one instance where it absolutely is, and where collective bargaining dynamics apply. One of the only last bastions of it, where you hear boomers talk about how this existed for popular genres, but the union job lifestyle only exists for orchestral players today. Do you have like personal family, friends, connections to, I mean, obviously neither Carson or I are classical musicians. We have never attempted to be classical musicians. We don't really know much about this world, but do you have any other like short degrees of separation to the VSO or like to anybody who plays in an orchestra yourself?
I don't. No, I don't know anyone who's kind of involved in an orchestra. So everything I've heard is just kind of hearsay or reading about orchestra work.
Yeah. So I do, but they are retired because one of my childhood best friends, both of his parents were VSO players.
Wow.
And for a while, based in Vancouver, and they lived in North Van the whole time. And they were both strings players. One was a violist and I believe a principal violist for some or most of that time. And the other was a cellist. And they raised my friend in North Van, and they were both VSO players. And the timing of that, I think, is interesting because I was looking, like we were talking about, has this happened before in Vancouver, for like when this had happened in Canada, like when the last time Canadian orchestras had labor disputes. And there may have been some since then, but I did find a 1999 CBC article titled Toronto Symphony Negotiations Hit Sour Note. This is at the bottom of my sheet if you want to check this out. And I found that in the late 90s, both the Toronto and Montreal orchestras had strikes. Okay. And both of those orchestra organizations were running significant deficits. And it sounded like both of them had accumulated significant debt. Yeah. So the article talks about like millions of dollars in debt, or like, $1 million-ish in annual deficits for those orchestras. Now, in contrast to that, I pulled an impact report type PDF thing from the VSO, and the VSO has an accumulated surplus and ran a surplus the last time they made one of those impact reports. So they were very happy to talk about that. Fiscal position of the VSO seems a lot better than the positions of the Toronto and Montreal orchestras were in 1999 when they both had strikes. So that was interesting to find out.
That is. I have a question about your friend. Did their parents have to get a babysitter every time they went to work? If they're both VSO players, that seems expensive.
Like in the evening times.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder how they rolled with that. Yeah, because, and there's an interesting wrinkle to that too, because he and I, he lived in North Van, I lived in New Westminster. Both of us commuted basically to this elementary school in East Richmond. And so there was significant driving, especially for him, involved just in going to school. So yeah, the timing of that can't have been very easy.
Yeah, I wonder about that. A few nights a week, potentially having to just both be out. Maybe he got to go. to the symphony every night. That would be great. Sorry, big distraction.
Yeah, we definitely got to sit in rehearsal in the side and sometimes on like the stage or the back of the stage for certain situations, like before or after something. You know, we got to see little peeks. I do recall. He must have gotten a lot more of those, but I got some of them with him at certain times. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, so Vancouver is doing financially, or the Symphony VSO is doing quite well financially.
Yeah.
Which is, you know, maybe an anomaly. We've talked about all these other arts organizations that are suffering, but the VSO does quite well. And so the union probably sees that and says like, hey, our salaries are not reflecting that, or have fallen behind maybe a little bit from that financial position.
Yeah, so they have a statement that they sent out to people like Vancouver Sun and Daily Hive, and where they talk about what they see there. First, I'll just blast through the boring minutia of how both sides are organized. Maybe could be interesting to support the picture. So on the symphony side, as far as I understand it, the Symphony Orchestra and the VSO School of Music, which has become a really important educational institution for young jazz musicians, probably the most important one in the province, since it was founded in the mid 2010s, like around the time we graduated high school. We didn't get to go to the VSO school, but now pretty much every like middle class aspiring young jazz musician does in the area here. The VSO and the school are both organized together under a nonprofit, and then there is also a foundation that is a registered charity that manages the endowment, and the endowment supports the operating budgets of the Vancouver Symphony Society overall. And so I think the endowment draws like 9% of VSO's revenue. So it doesn't rely hugely on the endowment for like its budget year on year, but it has an endowment that's over $50 million, $53 million, I think they threw out in some of the articles about this. And some draws from that endowment support the operating budget. Tickets are a lot of it. And they talk in that impact report about like how ticket revenue has gone up a lot since even before COVID, like since 2019. So they've made back ticket revenue since COVID, and it's increasing. So they're doing well at the moment on the VSO side. Then on the union side, the union is the Vancouver Musicians Association, the VMA, which is also known as AFM Local 145. So AFM is like the parent union that's based in the US, the American Federation of Musicians, which is really old. And the AFM has 300 chapters, of which the Vancouver Musicians Association is one. It's Local 145 out of 300.
Wow.
And the AFM is part of the AFL-CIO, which is like a big federation of unions that has like significant political power in the US still, because it involves other sectors. But like the musicians union sector on its own, I mean, is far less relevant and prominent today. The Canadian Federation of Musicians is a thing that exists too, like as an organization, as a brand. It is far less relevant today, and few gigs involve it other than orchestral gigs today. And so even though on the VSO side things are kind of making sense and growing, on the union side, this has been like a decades-long decline in how many gigs are union gigs out of what's happening out there in the world.
Interesting. I will say, as a note to, music labor organizations, you might want to work on branding. You said so many acronyms, and they all went in one ear, out the other. Something catchy. I know that's not a union's first priority, but man, I feel like they need kind of a catchy thing. My other comment is, given that we talk about so many arts organizations suffering in 2025, maybe the last couple of years, maybe even just post-COVID, why, in your mind, why do you think the VSO is doing so well? Like having a tens of millions of dollars endowment that they like don't have to touch. I have not heard of arts organizations doing that well.
Yeah, they don't say what their total revenue is. So yeah, we don't know how much of it they're drawing on, but yeah, not very much probably. If it's $53 million and it's 9% of the budget, yeah, it's probably not very much. Well, for one, they have a great space.
Yeah.
The Orpheum, is like a beautiful venue, a premier venue.
Yeah.
They seem to have made a pretty successful artistic director hire, conductor, Otto Tausk, who's been around for a few years now, succeeding late Bramwell Tovey, who was here for a while. So there's like some stability there on the artistic side. They brought in a new executive in January 2020. So this executive, Angela Elster, she came from the Royal Conservatory of Music in a management role from Toronto. She came here in 2020
Oh,
to
interesting.
be the president and CEO of the VSO of the Vancouver Symphony Society. And so she's overseen this growth since COVID, I guess, to a point that was higher than pre-COVID ticket sales. They do a lot of different things. They do a lot of popular stuff that the classical old heads wouldn't like, but that probably bring in a lot more people. I think the last time I went to the Orpheum was to see the violinist Hilary Hahn play, which was really cool. It was like a year or two ago with Vez. Vez went to see the YouTubers Two-Set Violin, the violin YouTuber duo. They're coming back. Their show might get canceled if there's a strike.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
It's happening soon. But they've been pretty good on the popular programming side. That's what sticks out to me. They reach out to me. This is the other thing, is I think you got to tip their hand to their marketing communication staff, because like there's somebody at the VSO who is in touch with me at Rhythm Changes.
Oh, wow.
And like I'll add shows where I wouldn't go out of my way to do it other than that. So I think they're pretty thoughtful about getting the word out.
Yeah, I was going to say their programming. I mean, I've noticed sometimes kind of smirkingly, like you'll sometimes look at the program and the next few things are like, there's not one like capital C classical, night in the next little while. And it's like, you're going to have some movie soundtrack being played.
Music of Lord of the Rings, I remember, was one. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. But it's clearly working, right? Like, and I think that's helping outreach and engagement and probably getting people who wouldn't. My last time was going with a friend's nieces to a daytime performance of the music of the Grinch.
Ah, yeah, similar idea, yeah.
Yeah, it was great. And so I could, definitely see. That actually was not, I have to rescind that. I don't think that was the VSO, but it was in the Orpheum, and I'm sure the VSO gets some of that, the society.
Mm-hmm. So here's a catchy number for you from the union's media release. They say, this is how they said that they brought this across in the Vancouver Sun. Quote, the annual base salary of the VSO is just over $75,000, she said, referring to the VMA's president, Audrey Patterson, who's a trumpet player. Quote again, but a base wage in the Toronto Symphony is nearly $100,000, in line with Canada's other major orchestras. End quote. That was a big statement from the union. I think in their Instagram video where they have a bunch of musicians talking in real, I think they either drop that number directly too, but they make a big deal of like, yeah, our salaries, we understand them to be 25% or whatever lower than what you would expect in a different major Canadian orchestra, and that we're lagging behind for some reason. Now, I don't know how exactly you can bet this. If you go, I tried to go on like Glassdoor, and there's not like a robust sequence of salary info on Glassdoor for like playing at Canadian orchestras, but it's plausible. It's extremely plausible. Yeah, it's not like this is crazy to believe. That would probably match my expectations. And it's funny because in the 1999 article, they say it's like $52,000 a year. So that also checks. That like depending on which inflation and cost of living track you followed and how successful your labor negotiations would have been over 25 years, you've probably either doubled or 1.5x'd. That sounds correct to me.
Yeah, totally. That's an interesting point also, that I wonder how much the Toronto and kind of Montreal organizing efforts, how much that contributed to a deal that like got them that 6-figure average salary and the kind of annual base. And, the fact that like Vancouver up until now hasn't had any sort of labor disputes, if that has actually been a factor, right? If they haven't had to like hash this one out, and now the disparity's gotten enough that it's a problem.
Because VSO would be more financially stable position today, if it is, I mean, we don't know the TSO financial position today, really, but like, just because it's in a more if it's in a more stable position today, it doesn't follow that the wages are necessarily going to be higher unless the union fights for it, right? Because the society would be happy to keep taking those surpluses and doing things with them if nobody else raised a fuss about it, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean, like a 25% difference, if that is really the case between Vancouver and Toronto, is crazy, right? Because like the cost of living is very high in both cities, and it's certainly not 25% lower in Vancouver than Toronto. Like, not even close.
Or you know what? Actually, the correct way to interpret the percentage difference would be, it would be a 33% difference.
Oh, yes, sorry.
100,000 being higher than, that was me who made that error at first. Yeah, 100,000 being 33% higher than 75,000 if you're looking at it that way. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is, again, a wild discrepancy when, you know, Vancouver and Toronto are kind of compete for the highest cost of living in the country. And if Montreal is around that 100K annual base, that's like, that goes a lot further in Montreal as far as just the average cost of living.
Yeah. It's right on the edge of the kind of situation into which you could throw the same kind of, or you could like raise your pitchfork in the same way as is being done a lot around the country right now due to cost of living. Because if I look back 2.5 decades again, and I think about my friend, right? Mm-hmm. You know, they had a place in Lynn Valley. You know, these two VSO players, they bought their house in Lynn Valley and they raised their son there.
Yeah.
And then, you know, they retired from the VSO and they moved outside of Metro Vancouver and they retired, right? But, you know, they were able to have that kind of middle class thing based on those two VSO player salaries. Now, obviously, we have eroded away the potential for pretty much every other type of musician to even think about doing this for 1 second.
Yeah.
You know, like that is all the non-union gig world. We are not even close to this.
Yeah.
But in this last bastion of union gig world, if they can keep pace in their collective bargaining, they can still cling to the edges of that. Where if you had like a VSO player couple today, you know, they are going to be able to weather the cost of living in Vancouver one way or another, whether it's with the condo or whether they're living a little bit further out than that.
Yeah.
You know, they can find a way to do it. They're still within the boundaries of that existence from 25 years ago, even if it's probably still not as desirable adjusted. You know, if you're thinking just about like housing and cost of living and things like that, they're still in the game. But where they are right now, it sounds like they're not. It sounds like they're just on the other side of that boundary, where if they don't do something now, it has just gotten away from them, and that even they can no longer do this anymore.
Yes. Has the VSO Society said anything in response to this, the labor action?
I don't think so. I think we can see when this comes out what's going to happen, because I think if any negotiations have happened, that probably wouldn't have come out yet either. I don't know. I'm going to go look on their Instagram as well and see if anything else has come. But you watched the initial video that you sent me. You'll see the musicians talking. Yeah. Which I'll link to that video. From the orchestra side, I don't think it's to their benefit to talk about it, really, is it?
Not really. Although you don't want to be the only party. If one party is saying quite a lot and you're saying absolutely nothing, it's not going to go great for you. You know, in a negotiation, you kind of need some public will on your side, but it doesn't sound like the orchestra has a whole lot to go on right now. The orchestra cannot claim they're broke because they're not. They can't even really claim that they would go broke if they made some of these increases, right? I'm not sure what the demands of the VMA are exactly, but the VSO is going to be fine.
Okay, so I found a response that has been added to a Daily Hive article that I think I already have linked, but this is the official response from the president of the VSO, Angela Elster, who I already mentioned. Quote, "We are disappointed that the musicians union issued 72-hour strike notice. We do not believe that the union's actions, including an aggressive public campaign, will assist in finding a resolution when management is still at the table, but we respect their right to strike if they so choose," end quote. So it sounds like things are breaking down. It sounds like we're going to have a stoppage here.
Wow. So, yeah. Best of luck to the VMA. That sounds tense.
Yeah. This is also from the Daily Harvard article. Quote, "Elster said that the VSO has proposed a meaningful increase in compensation over 4 years on top of the 32% increase already realized since 2019, end quote, which is an interesting detail for the VSO president to add, because that suggests that they probably had it pretty flat all the way from like 2000 to 2019.
Yeah.
And then maybe they finally got a bigger raise in then, and now this would be another one. But
75K base is not a great salary in 2019 either.
Not for a union job,
No.
orchestral musician like that, you wouldn't think. Yeah.
No. I mean, yeah, as far as like just even livability here in Vancouver. So that is interesting. And I'm guessing that the deal being offered, that kind of increase over a set amount of years, is probably like, no, they need a significant increase now, and then they can talk about what the future looks like.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the lay of the land. I mean, we will see with the timing of this coming out where it evolves from here. And depending on where it goes, there might be some people that I could talk to or we could talk to add to the conversation. But we'll see what happens. We'll see if anything gets canceled. It's kind of a departure from the environments we find ourselves in out here in the working world of music. This is a part of it that we're not as familiar of, but it came up this week. So I'm interested to see what happens here.
Yeah, we'll be following this. It is a wild story. Will, do you have a recommendation for the people out there?
Yeah, I do. It's a bit of an oblique one. So there
Great.
is a writer named Ted Gioia, who is one of the most successful music writers on Substack, who is a boomer through and through. And he's a big jazz person. He knows a lot about jazz. And he recently published a piece called "Is Mid-20th Century American Culture Getting Erased?" which I thought was pretty interesting because, there's some good stuff in that period of time. And my recommendation thus is to go watch, listen to, read, or otherwise consume, and I'll give some years, anything between, just for fun, let's pick this 15-year window. Go watch, listen to, or read anything that was made between 1941 and 1956. Because I think that is that's well enough before rock and roll. That's before like a lot of the most famous jazz albums too. You could still find famous jazz albums in that time period, obviously, but we're not talking Kind of Blue or Giant Steps or whatever. It's before that. So 1941 and 1956, consume some mid-20th century American culture, whatever you pick.
That is an oblique recommendation. I like it. I'll have to check that out.
I picked Glenn Gould's Goldberg Variations. I think that was 1956.
Yeah.
I think it falls in that
that's
category.
Great. That's awesome. My recommendation is an album. Actually, twice in a row, I'm in the world of what we would call y'alternative, which is
which I like
country infused alternative rock music. This is an album called Bleeds by the band Wednesday. Wednesday is maybe now best known for its guitarist, MJ Lenderman, who might have just last year surpassed Wednesday in kind of popularity. Wednesday, Will's a Wednesday hater from way back because of they lost money on South by Southwest in a way that, one might argue was kind of foolish allocation of capital. But they're a great band. This album is really good.
I think I timestamped the end of Twitter. I think that was before Elon took over Twitter, maybe, when I wrote about Wednesday complaining about how they traveled to South by Southwest and barely made any money. Like they complained about that on Twitter. I'm pretty sure when I wrote about it, I was still calling it Twitter, and it wasn't for political reasons. I think it was still called Twitter. So it's a funny memory of how I first came across. But that would have been over 3 years ago.
Yeah, it was, and it became kind of a big story at the time. But they've persisted making good records. Yeah,
I'll check this out. I mean, I don't even really know that much MJ Lenderman. Like I've watched Tiny Desk. I don't know any MJ Lenderman solo albums. I've listened to a bit of Wednesday's discography. So yeah, I mean, I like this kind of music in general, so I'm sure I'll dig it.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll be up your alley.
Yeah. All right. That's what we got. Episode 20 came a week earlier than we thought, but still a nice round number to hit. So we are going to be back with Upsample. It's going to be 3 weeks. It's going to be after Thanksgiving, Canadian Thanksgiving, when we come back with the next new episode. So a lot will have happened between now and then. We'll see if there are any human bands left on the Spotify charts. We'll see what the state of how many apps, people are boycotting and all that good stuff. I'm sure there'll be a lot of updates between now and then. We can see if anybody has built it and if everybody's died between now and then on all the many things we could be talking about.
Oh man, what a year.
Yeah. What a year, and we still got a whole quarter left, so let's go maximize some shareholder value. So
absolutely, that's what I'm going to do after we get off this call, is maximize some more shareholder value.
You know it.